bleed green? Are you an ultimate Eagles football fan? Well, you're in the right place. This is Birds 365, hosted by the new Mac and Mac, Jody McDonald and John McMullen.
Here we go!
Who collectively have covered and talked about more than 50 plus years of Eagles football. Kick off your day with Birds 365. You'll get debate.
We love to argue.
You'll get the real story from inside the locker room. And you'll hear from some of the great football minds from around the region. You're about to become an Eagles insider. Get in the game. Join Jody Mack and Johnny Mack and join the football community that flocks to Birds 365. Birds 365 starts right now.
Welcome to the NFL. Let's go! Let's go! Go!
And a good undefeated Tuesday morning, everybody. Jody Mack with Johnny Mack. The Mac and Mac guys here on Birds 365. 4 weeks in the rearview mirror. Hey, up and down 4 weeks in the rearview mirror. And an undefeated 4 weeks in the rearview mirror. It's pretty good when you're up and down and a little inconsistent. Oh, by the way, you're undefeated. That's not the worst thing in the world. We're here to talk about what the Eagles have done in their first 4 weeks and start to look ahead this upcoming weekend against the Rams out in L.A. Eagles having to go coast to coast for game number 5. Johnny Mack yesterday had a chance to hear from the Eagles head coach on his day after press conference. Anything surprising, anything enlightening, anything par for the course? What was your take from what Coach Sirianni had to say yesterday?
I think it was a little bit more honest than usual. Especially with Cam Jurgens and the plan there. That surprised me. In fact, I had the first question, and I didn't want to burn it on Cam Jurgens because I assumed he'd give no information. And he did give some information, mainly that it's week to week. So in Eagles parlance, that means he's not playing this week, which is big because obviously it's the LA Rams and Aaron Donald. And any kind of, ended the speculation, it's going to be Sua Opeta because there's a lot of ways they could go with Tyler Steen, Jack Driscoll. You can move him back inside. He's done it before. But he did play pretty well, forced into action against Washington. So the fact that he let that cat out of the bag is a little bit different than what he usually does. But Sua probably earned it. And yeah, he was very honest about Tyler Steen. And I'm trying to get the exact quote. I think you see where we lie right now between Sua and Tyler. Sua's been up and Tyler's been inactive. So Sua would be the next man up. That's as concrete as it ever gets for Nick Sirianni when it comes to injury type situations. So that was a bit of a surprise. Yeah.
And I didn't get to watch any game film or anything like that. And as the game is ongoing, I got it taped. I haven't gone back and rewatched it yet, but I didn't notice Sua Opeta when he was in there. That's the first thing you want to say about an offensive lineman is you didn't notice him. If you didn't notice him, that means he's probably done a pretty damn good job because you only notice him when he gets beat, when he makes a mistake, when he jumps offside like Landon Dickerson. So that was a good sign. And I guess after the official game breakdown, he must have graded out pretty well. I know Sirianni said even Lane came up to him after the game and said, hey, Sue did real well. Right next to me, we had no issues whatsoever with Jurgens out of the game. When you get the stamp of approval from the best right tackle in all of football, that's probably going to add to the discussion as to, let's just keep this guy right where he is at right guard.
Yeah, and, the offense as a whole was more effective when he was in there. So that factors into it as well. yeah, that's all you can hope for when you lose a player in game. And I thought, you know, looking at the PFF numbers, it's surprising he was much better as a pass blocker than a run blocker, and that's typically the 180. He's typically pretty good as a run blocker and struggles in pass protection. So we'll see. I mean, big test this week. I mean, the Rams are going to circle that. Make no mistake, because they move Aaron around, and they're going to understand. I mean, they got that circled. So he's going to need some help, but everybody needs some help against Aaron Donald, and you'll see a lot of Kelsey sliding over to help Sua as much as possible against one of the greatest defensive players of all time, to be honest. But we got plenty of time to talk about that game. And by the way, they would have circled Cam Jurgens too. So, that they would have went after Cam as well. Right. So, it'll be a matchup to keep an eye on.
And by the way, and Cam Jurgens had played pretty damn well the first 3+ weeks of the season. I'm not trying to call Cam Jurgens into question here, but he was the young guy on the Eagles offensive line. If you're, would you say circle it? If you're going to circle it, the kid's going to be Cam Jurgens basically every week of the season. Yeah. So the task that Sua Opeta has is probably the easiest of any task the Eagles could have if you got to replace somebody on that offensive line. So while it's not great that you're losing a guy who's gotten off to a real nice start his first year as a starter, it's not an impossible task. Here's the question that I don't know anybody asked yesterday, so I'll ask you to just speculate for me a little bit here. What happens if Jason Kelce gets hurt in game?
Oh, no, yeah, I brought that up. This is a layered injury. Wrote about that at JAKIB Sports. I mean, he's the backup center as well, and they don't have a backup center on the 53 unless you'd have to move Landon. Landon can obviously do it. Was an All-American center at Alabama, but they have turned that page, and they haven't even mentioned Landon Dickerson at center for years now, obviously, because he's developed into one of the best left guards in football. So, and then you got the shuffling of massive chairs. If you got to move him, you got to figure out left guard. You already got Sua at right guard, so he can't play left guard. So yeah, that is an issue as well. Now, the good news is Jason Kelce's played in 145 straight games or whatever it is. So, but lightning tends to strike in these types of situations. Ultimately, the Eagles have a couple of players on the practice squad, Brett Toth, but we know his snapping troubles in training camp. And you can imagine, I'm saying they're going to circle Sua Opeta with Aaron Donald. Well, if Brett Toth is elevated and goes in at center, that circle's going to move one spot over. And the same type of thing. Julian Good-Jones is also on the practice squad. He's got experience as a center. But here's the thing, Jody. You got to burn one of your practice squad spots.
Right.
For Braden Mann. Unless you want to put him up to the 53, it's going to be interesting on Wednesday to see how they manipulate this roster, because another part, Britton Covey's in the concussion protocol. And no player, we mentioned this last week, the NFL's gotten stricter. There's no announcement. They never announce these type of things. No player has gotten through the concussion protocol to play the next week this season. None around the entire league, not just Philadelphia, zero. So it's basically you're out one game no matter what, which means they're not going to have a punt returner. And in that process, you might have to bring up Greg Ward unless you have confidence in Olamide Zaccheaus to do it. Quez Watkins doesn't practice, but he's been out with the hamstring. A lot of questions this week as far as how they're going to handle the roster and those practice squad elevations.
My guess would be, tell me if you agree or disagree. I don't think they would use a practice squad elevation because, right, they only got two. The punter's one. I think there's a better chance, even though it's just a safety net, as compared to a guy who's actually going to have to do something. I think they take their chance with a punt returner. And it could be a significant drop-off because, hey, it's 4 straight weeks we said, nice job, Britton Covey. This week against Washington had a couple of really good, just go straight ahead, get as many yards as you can. If it's 4, that's fine. If it's 8, that's great. If it's 10 or 12, and he had a couple of those, that's tremendous. If you get a guy back there who's just going to fair catch everything, it's a little bit of a deterrent. But my guess is they would do that before leaving themselves well undermanned on the offensive line. If their second off the practice squad call-up has to be something, my guess it would be offensive line fortification rather than a different punt return.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they have to bring up a center. So I think it's more of, do you want to pull the trigger on Braden Mann early? They got to this is the last week anyway. They got to put him on the 53. Do you want to pull that trigger up now? He hasn't been impressive, to be honest, as a punter.
Right, but just to confirm, and I apologize for interrupting. If you elevate Braden Mann, that means you got to cut somebody. Does that mean Eli Ricks goes back to the practice squad?
Well, there's a host of guys. I mean, we've been talking about it. It's like, well, Kentavious Street plays a little bit, but I mean, what's the point there? Other than it's very good depth. You can probably get him through, and he's vested, so you could do a wink with him and just release him and bring him back to the practice squad. Try to manipulate it that way. Or some of the younger guys who don't play. Rashad Penny, he's inactive last week. What's he doing here? Other than depth purposes. And look, if somebody gets hurt, you'll need a player like that. I'm not saying, but he's vested as well. It's a chance to do a wink with him, or you can cut one of the young guys. Mario Goodrich, I would think, would be before Ricks, but you could throw Goodrich and Ricks. I mean, they're not playing. And you needed corners, and they're not playing. So, they clearly want to stash Ricks, so I think it would be more Goodrich than Ricks. But there's a lot of ways, a lot of avenues you can go.
And Goodrich is really interesting because this is the coach's evaluation. You're back down there. You get a chance to see with your own 2 eyes and grade with your own 2 eyes. The Eagles coaching staff has a major advantage in that they can direct their taping in practice any way that they want to get a specific look at somebody. This guy went from playing significant snaps to not even being dressed. How bad was he in that game to see, at least if you're judging by his usage, the drop-off in the thought process that the Eagles coaching staff has about Mario Goodrich? What went that wrong that he fell from grace that friggin' quickly?
Yeah, I mean, actions speak louder than words. So they gave you that answer. They felt he did not play well. Now they gave you the lip service about he improved during the game. I mentioned the numbers. He was targeted 6 times. He gave up 6 completions. Now a couple of them were for essentially nothing to the running backs, but he did give up some gas plays to Jefferson. But I mean, that's maybe the best receiver in football against a backup slot corner. I'm not sure I'd be willing to throw him out, the baby with the bathwater because he got beat by Justin Jefferson. I mean, great corners get beat by him. I'm a little surprised they soured so quickly, but you mentioned practice. That's part of it as well. Maybe they don't like what he's doing in practice. It's probably not just what you saw in that week 2 game, but he didn't play well. As opposed to Sua in a similar situation, played pretty well.
Yep.
He did not, but you need a slot corner, and they went in a different direction. So that, to me, tells you all you need to know, basically.
Speaking of the slot corner, as you mentioned, Coach Sirianni, at least in the aspect of the offensive line and where they're going, while Juergens is out, pretty forthcoming. He didn't give you any real good feel on the health of D-backs who didn't play this week, either Justin Evans and or Sidney Brown, as to their potential return for this week against the Rams, did he?
No, not that far. You know, Evans seemed close on Friday of last week. He got back to practice. He had a helmet. So I think there's some positivity there. With hamstrings, again, you know, we've seen it with Quez, especially with fast guys. You don't want to mess with that. Um, I you know, did get some information that it wasn't a serious hamstring injury with Sydney, so maybe that helps up. Maybe Quez's was more serious. So we'll have to see on Wednesday where they are. If I expect Justin Evans to practice because he was back on Friday at least a little bit, and with Sidney Brown, if he's even limited, I think that's very positive. But if he's not practicing, I think that's very negative on Wednesday.
So today would be any practice whatsoever?
No, today is
both Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday is the first time they have a chance to get back out there. All right. Opinion for you. If both Evans and Brown are good to go, they might not be quite 100%, but they reach the percentage they need to play to be active and in the lineup for the Rams game. If both are good to go, you think Brown is more likely to drop down and play some in the slot over Evans? Or do you think Evans is the guy that they'll move out of the safety position?
No, they already made that decision in Tampa. Yeah, Sidney's going to be the guy. It's just a matter of how quickly they can ramp him up so Bradberry has to do less. They're going to keep Justin at safety.
Is that because Justin is needed at safety, or because they think Brown is a better fit dropping in and playing his non-natural position?
Well, I think both. I think one, Evans is their best, they feel their best coverage safety, and that's a big part. That's why he won the job to begin with.
That's why I thought that it might be debatable as to whether he should go down and play in the slot, because that is purely a cover position.
No, there's a lot of run fits in the slot, and that's a big part of it. And you're a bigger part of run support, but not that Justin can't do that. They just want the coverage ability, and at safety, they're more concerned. And you saw it a little bit with Terrell Edmonds struggling in coverage back there. Not that, you know, he's Ronnie Lott, but they feel he's the best of what they have. And they want coverage ability, CJ Gardner-Johnson. They want that type of ability at safety. With Sidney, you know, it's ironic. He said he feels more comfortable in the slot than he does at safety right now, because he played near the line of scrimmage at Illinois almost exclusively. Now he's playing box safety, not as much slot, but either way, he's closer to the line of scrimmage. That's what he's more comfortable with. And the Eagles think he's got the ability, ability to develop into a coverage safety, but they weren't playing him there because they didn't think he was ready. So they think that was sort of their way of getting him on the field, and he feels more comfortable. And it kind of worked out in that aspect. And I think ultimately, now the trade deadline is at the end of this month. We're in October. If it goes bad for another week or two, I mean, I think nickel slot corner will be where Howie's looking on the trade market. But I think the hope, and again, hope is not a strategy. The hope is Sidney Brown eventually becomes the full-time slot corner.
All right, so let me give you one more potential kind of hypothetical. Some people don't like my hypothetical questions here on the stream, but I do like my hypotheticals. Let's say they come to the realization, yeah, we need to upgrade that position. We've got Sidney Brown playing his 6th, 7th, 8th game of the NFL career, out of position, something he didn't cross-train for, something the Eagles like to pat themselves on the back for. They're cross-training. You tell me, how many snaps Sidney Brown get in the slot during camp this year?
Oh, zero.
That's what I thought. So cross training, not an option here. That train has already left the station. So they decide that's their biggest position of need. That's what they have to go out and fill. If they're willing to go high level shopping, is the Buda Baker conversation restoked here? I know that he wanted to get out of Arizona when they said they wouldn't or couldn't trade him. He went back to work and is ready to play for the Cardinals this year. Another guy who's got some injury issues, but at the top of his game is a first flight safety. Is Buda Baker revisited as a potential?
Well, Arizona worked things out with them. So things would have to go in a negative direction again for them to consider trading him. But look, the Eagles are already, they've staked their claim. They're a legit Super Bowl contender. So I'm never going to say never with Howie as far as making a splash, but that'd be a lot of money and a lot of assets to give up. So I would still say, very unlikely. But you're going all in to try to win a Super Bowl. That's a really good player, a really versatile player who can, do both, play safety, play in the slot. I mentioned in the offseason that perfect fit for this team, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But I two things. I don't think Arizona wants to trade him, and he's going to he cost a lot of money, obviously. So you have the salary, which the Eagles are willing to pay when they need to pay. But the bigger issue would be you got to give up something significant. And Howie likes to win trades, shall we say.
But I think Howie also likes to win Super Bowls. I think he enjoyed 2017 greatly. And if he thinks Buda Baker is the kind of player that can put him over the top, how do you go, but we really don't want to give up a second-round pick? I don't know that would be my attitude if I were the general manager of the Eagles. But you're right. First thing first, Arizona has to want to trade him. And you're right. They did redo his contract, which was something he was looking for. I don't think he's going to go in and say, don't you dare trade me. I think Buda Baker will stay open-minded. If 2 weeks from now, the Cardinals are 1-5. And
he's got to get healthy, I should mention. He's got to get healthy.
Right. Starting with the assumption he's going to be healthy. If the Cardinals are 1-5 and the Eagles are 6-0, do you think Buda Baker is going to complain about being traded?
No, I don't think he's going to complain. But the issue is, he'd probably have to press it and say, all right, I'm not happy again. Because I think from Arizona, the book is closed. They worked it out. He's back. He's one of their best players. I don't think they want to trade him. So he would have to press the issue and say, all right, this team stinks, whatever. They're not going anywhere. I'm unhappy. I want out. So I think something would have to happen. He would have to stress the issue because from their standpoint, they're fine. I mean, they turned the page. They worked it out. He's one of their best players. He's a foundational piece. I don't think they want to trade him. So something would have to trade. Something would have to turn for him to even be available.
All right, then let me ask this. And we got Les Bowen sitting in our green room. We're going to punch Les up in just a couple of minutes. Arizona foundational piece. Aren't they like a year away from being a year away? So if that's the case, is Buda Baker at age, by then he's 30, still a foundational piece for them? Do you really think that they go, oh, we can't trade him because we can't picture our team going forward without Buda Baker?
Well, if you want to give him if you want to give him a first round pick, I'm pretty sure Howie isn't going there. I mean, if you want to overpay, yeah, I'm with you. I trade anybody basically if I'm Arizona for where they are and what they want to do. I never like to compare anybody to the Sixers in basketball tanking, but for where they are, as you said, a year away from a year away, maybe. If you want to overpay, but I don't think that's his MO, even on the cusp of another Super Bowl.
All right. Maybe I'm giving the Cardinals general manager too much credit. If the Eagles offer me a second round pick, maybe a pick swap of a 5 and a 6.
Well, remember, second round pick from the Eagles
is
Ain't that
almost a
good.
third. I get that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that way you can make the same thing about a first round pick. Giving up it's going to be in the late 20s and the 30s.
That's a
somewhere.
lot.
What's
Late
the big
20s,
deal?
a lot better than almost the third round. That's what I mean. So
Late
the
20s is almost the second. So it's almost the second as compared to almost the third. I get that. If they offer you that and maybe a pick of swapped later for Buda Baker for 2 more years while the Cardinals are still in rebuilding mode, I ain't got to think about it if you're Arizona. Maybe they don't. Maybe you've got a better read on where they're at.
yeah.
With JD
Well, I mean,
connection.
you
I
never
don't
know
but
with young GMs. I mean, a lot of them are showing their flaws and their inexperience. And Monty's already made a big mistake out there as the tampering issue. But I just looked him up. He's only 27. He's a 3-time All-Pro. Yeah, I worked it out. I'm not trading him.
Okay.
That's me. Now, a lot of these GMs make mistakes. Unless there's a reason I have to trade him, I don't see why they would even visit it, to be honest.
But you know as well as I do, you've been doing this a long time. Sometimes the trade you don't make, that if enough information gets out there, everybody believes it was offered to you and you don't pull the trigger, you can be called on the carpet for that as much as the trade that you do make that you actually get results for and can judge, yeah, that wasn't a good idea. He's McMullen, I'm McDonald. That makes this the Mac and Mac Birds 365 Tuesday edition. We're going to add to the mix. One less Bowen is going to join us next here on Birds 365.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
At Pond Lehocky, we've recovered billions of dollars for our clients, and we're confident we can do the same for you. With over 250 years of combined courtroom experience, we've helped over 100,000 injured clients obtain some of the largest settlements in Pennsylvania. One conversation is all it takes to help you and your family get back on track. If you've been injured in an accident, give Pond Lehocky a call.
They're carving them up and good play calling along the way. First and goal at the 6.
On the field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Staffing is not easy, but that's what we do every day, all day. The key to our success is storytelling, asking the right questions to find the right people. Hi, I'm Gary Kane, president of Kane Partners. We want to be your staffing partner.
Since 1977, it's always been about you, the community, at Rafferty Subaru. And through the Subaru Love Promise, we prove we care by supporting charities like So Good Now.
So Good Now helps kids in under-resourced areas by connecting them with student athletes to serve as mentors. We remove barriers so athletes can help youth in the corners of our communities where light and love are needed most.
When you choose Rafferty Subaru, you help organizations like So Good Now.
It's all about you at Rafferty Subaru.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
And the big story on Action News?
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Appreciate you streaming in this morning on Birds 365 with Mac and Mac. Les Bowen joins us. Doing it from outside again. Another nice enough day to get out. We'll see if he's got the same birds that Chris Franklin has in his backyard. Les, appreciate you getting up early for us today. Here's where I want to open up, because John and I debated this pretty good yesterday. No one would debate that the Eagles' offense was better than the Eagles' defense this past week against the Commanders.
Mm-hmm.
Of the Eagles' defense, bigger issue, the second level or the third level? If we put the linebackers aside and say they played maybe their best game of the entire year, which was a bigger detriment to the Eagles' defense on Sunday? The front 5, 4, 5, however many you want to put up there, or the back 4 or 5, the corners / safeties, or the defensive line? Which you think had the biggest drop off on Sunday?
Oh, I thought the coverage was the problem, really. But you could certainly say, going into that game, we thought the Eagles had this huge advantage with their defensive line against the Commanders' offensive line. And it took a long time for that to become the case. It became the case in the second half, but the Commanders scored 17 points on their first 3 drives, and the Eagles weren't getting pressure at that point. But no, I wouldn't say in the game overall, I thought, the Eagles ended up with how many sacks? 5 or something?
5. 3 from Nicholas Morrow, who I like to call Lawrence.
The defensive line only got 2. The Eagles got 5, but the D line got 2.
Yeah.
Still, they're creating he's running through the vacancies created by people blocking the defensive line. So, the problem is on the back end. They're down to people that they just never thought at this point in the season would be playing. I think it's a temporary problem. I would guess they're going to have at least a couple guys back this week. I guess Sidney Brown probably, and Evans as well. But the slot corner thing is a problem. They can play with Bradberry in the slot and Josh Jobe outside. Josh Jobe isn't terrible. He's better than some corners they've had there, God knows, over the last several years before they got this set up with Slay and Bradberry. But he's not optimal. He's not as good as Bradberry. And, I would look for, as we look toward the trading deadline, I'd try to find a slot corner somewhere. And it doesn't have to be, some star that you're plucking off somebody's, just a useful player, somebody that is maybe sitting on a practice squad that can help you. I don't know. A few years ago, guys like Crevon LeBlanc, you remember him?
Oh, don't bring him up, Les. The fans love Crevon. They're still talking about bringing him back.
He's
Strap, baby.
Been out of the league for a while now, but I mean, a guy
better.
a young guy like somebody in the situation he was in Detroit when the Eagles found him, or Epps, when they did that.
Yeah.
A few years. That's
him up
what
off waivers.
That's what you look for. I can't imagine they're going to, grab anybody's starting slot corner at the trade. Maybe they will, but I think that's unlikely. But yeah, that's where the problem really lies. I was disappointed in the front 5. I thought it was their worst game in terms of, you barely noticed Jalen Carter at all. Davis, Fletcher Cox was really the best of the group, I thought.
I thought Brandon was really good.
Yeah, Brandon was great. Yeah, Brandon plays very limited snaps.
Yeah.
I mean, and based on that game, he might have to play more.
Yeah.
It was not what I expected from the Eagles front, that's for sure.
Yeah, and that's the expectation of the front is so much more than the secondary, even with Slay and Bradberry. Although I think Slay had his worst game of the season as well.
Yeah.
Which is
I just think there was a lot of confusion back there, John.
Yeah.
I think there were guys playing the wrong coverages. And
the communication. This defense drives me nuts, Les, because it's all based on communication, those zone coverages on the back end. And when you have new pieces or younger players who don't know what they're doing,
right?
Yeah, then Slay looks like he's getting beat. Maybe he isn't. Then he talks about it. You don't know ball, and he,
according to Slay never gets beat. There's always
that's
an explanation attached to everything.
That's okay. But what I think happens in a lot of those situations is he's trying to get somebody else. Like No. You know, and meanwhile, his guy is.
That's true. That is very true. Jody can tell you. I complain about that. That's the biggest thing I hate with this defense is its impact on young defensive backs. Because with Bradberry and Slay, yeah, they're good. They're good. They have no issues, and they communicate and they pass people off. And then you see a new piece come in, and it's like a fire drill.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and
with Joe, by the way, that much more credit to Reed Blankenship because he's
Reed's
still a
great.
young quarterback. He didn't even think he was going to make the team last year. Got a hand fed into games, and he looks like a grizzled veteran of 5 years out there playing. So you're right about the Eagles, and it's tough to bring young DBs into the system. Not Reed Blankenship. He's just that good.
Yeah. The whole NFL should be ashamed of themselves for missing on Reed Blankenship because he's a really good player. He really is. And in a lot of ways, he saved that game last, back-to-back plays. Yeah. Also,
God, yes.
You know, it's a special year, Les. It might be. The Eagles don't play any 1:00 games.
Yeah.
And they needed less cameras. I still think McLaurin was in. If that's a primetime game, they have more cameras. They probably have a better angle. Marcus Mariota got his head in the way.
Yeah.
I think he caught the football.
Well, you might be right, except so his foot is on top of Blankenship's hand.
Yeah.
wrist,
Reed did a
forearm.
great job to make
When did
difficult.
it touch the ground in bounds?
I don't know, but if we have more angles, if we can get
I
around
just don't
Marcus's
think it ever
head.
did. The foot is on top of a guy's arm. That doesn't count.
No.
I don't think. I think he has to, excuse the expression, touch grass.
Yeah, and we're talking about the toes coming down.
Yeah.
But I just think if you have those high def Sunday night football cameras, they probably have a better angle. You probably get a clear view. And I know and I tell Jody this, how many times do we say, oh, Devontae Smith didn't catch that? And he somehow gets his toes in. Great receivers.
Yeah.
I don't know how they do it, but they always get their toes in. And
Well,
I say, no way
that's one of the remarkable developments of HD replay in the last 20 years or so. You know, when we were growing up, guys were ruled out of bounds.
Yeah.
All the time. You almost never saw, one of those toe tap catches. Everybody always assumed, because it always looks like to the naked eye, the guy's 10 yards out of bounds.
Yeah.
And then you go back and look up. Yeah, he got him down. Yeah. And you didn't used to ever see that. It just wasn't part of the game.
Yeah. Devontae's amazing.
If on the play in question, we had that better angle that you're talking about, better ISO camera, might have shown more definitively that he was out of bounds.
It's possible. It's possible. I am relying on Terry McLaurin, how good he is. He's one of those guys that tends to get the toes down. I just think, and Marcus's best play of the year. He got his head right in front of it from the back.
See, let it be on the record that John McMullen brought up Marcus Mariota before Jordy McDonald. Because if Marcus Mariota has to go into a game this week, because Jalen Hurts happens to get injured, John McMullen brought up Marcus. I have not mentioned the Eagles' backup quarterback.
He did a great job. Obfuscating
the
camera. He did a great job. He did a tremendous
Will he do a great job if he actually has to take a snap this weekend against the Rams? I didn't want a guy to put that jinx out there. I'm glad you did. Thank you very much for that, Johnny Mac. All right, let me ask you about the linebacker play, because this was something John and I debated yesterday too. He looked up the PFF numbers. Apparently, PFF doesn't reduce someone's grade because he's playing in front of a very good defensive line. Nicholas Morrow, second-ranked linebacker in the National Football League.
Yeah, baby. Guess who number one is, by the way? Guess who? Wild guess.
Yeah,
Roquan Smith. The Chicago Bears paid $100 million for all-ball linebackers. They had Roquan Smith and Nick Morrow last year. They're 1-2. Now, obviously, Roquan's a very good player, but
yeah, the only reason I know that is Clay Harbor tweeted it yesterday. He lives in Chicago now.
Yes,
and does
he's
Chicago
a Chicago
media.
guy.
That was his point. It's like, what the?
Yeah.
But with Morrow, I guess the sacks and all that, I don't know
Yeah.
what their grading system is. Morrow's playing just fine. I don't know that
he's playing really well. I'd
probably rather have Fred Warner myself, but
so would I.
Okay, yeah.
But I will say this, because Seth Joyner brought it up on our post game show last, and I dismissed it, and I'm starting to rethink it. I have to admit, Nicholas is playing very well. Seth brought up, at some point, is he going to Wally Pip Nakobe Dean? And I went, no, that's not going to happen. And I see you're the same way. Did we give too much deference to Nakobe Dean? What has Nakobe Dean done other than in Athens, Georgia, where Nick Morrow's out there making plays?
They drafted him, Howie Roseman runs this thing, and they drafted Nakobe Dean to do that, and they really haven't had a good look at him yet. I don't think they're gonna. I don't think they're that good that they can just bench Nakobe Dean.
But I'm saying if he keeps, and I dismissed it too. So don't get me wrong, I completely dismissed it when Seth brought it up. But if he keeps playing like this, like why are you defaulting to Nakobe Dean?
Because you drafted him to do this, and they think that he's this great leader and the shot caller and all that for the defense. But I don't know. I'm arguing against. I was skeptical, the beginning of the season. That was kind of one of my points, was they're depending on this guy that didn't play last year, really. And I've never liked his size, frankly. And when he got injured, I mentioned that, and people are, oh, it's his foot. You can't say it's his size. Blah, blah, blah. Well, I just think a small linebacker is going to get injured more wherever, whether it's his foot or his ear or whatever, But I think they've got a lot invested in Nakobe Dean in terms of their, structure and their.
Yeah, and I think he's a better player. I mean, Nick will probably go up. That's the thing about players in this league. You can have a great game, but the great players are consistent. He might go out in Los Angeles, have a terrible game.
Yeah. And Kazir White this time last year looked like a Pro Bowler.
Yeah.
And then down the stretch, he really didn't, and he's not a bad player, but he wasn't as good as his first several games with the Eagles. Seemed to show.
I look at this differently than either Seth Joyner or John McMullen. Seth is like, did he get Wally pipped? In other words, Nakobe gets healthy, he sits on the bench. John said, not even happening because they're committed. As Les just said, they're committed. Here's my question. Why can't linebacker be a rotational position? They use so many darn defensive linemen in and out, and somehow they find snaps for Derek Barnett. But last year when Nakobe Dean was on this team, he got 30 snaps for the entire year. They just refuse to put him in there. They have their two guys. They stay with their two guys. Now, this is a new defense coordinator, and maybe they'll look at things differently. Why can't linebacker be a rotational position as well?
And in fact, you see that. You remember Christian Ellis and how important he was several weeks ago to this defense?
Yeah.
Guess how many linebacker snaps he got Sunday?
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
He played on special teams. You're right. That is how you. I don't know that there's the green dot thing. John, you're more up on this than I am because you're actually working and I'm retired. But how many green dots do you get? Like
you can have as many as 3 during the game, but
that's probably part of it. They probably don't want to have that guy, that captain sort of, the communicator changing back and forth all the time. But I don't know. That's it is interesting. That's one of the first things I noticed when I looked at the playing time yesterday was, Christian Ellis doesn't play anymore.
When Nakobe got hurt, I believe they split it. I believe they gave it to Christian Ellis. And then when Christian wasn't in, they played a lot of dime that game. Reed Blankenship took it.
Right.
And now they've given it to Nick Morrow. And he's played well, so they haven't had a need to take it off him. Yeah, I mean, I'm, I've always said if you're on the field and you're playing well, they're not taking you off. I don't know if that's the case here, and
it'll be interesting to see what they do. I don't think we're that close to finding out. I don't get any sense. When can Nakobe come back? It's
next week.
He's got one more game.
Yeah. Do you see any sense that is he out there?
I heard 4 to 6 weeks, so it's not. He could be out a couple, and you might even manipulate it that way. If Nick continues to play well in Los Angeles, you might say, "All right, take your time, Nakobe, and wait for the bad game. You wait for the shoe to drop, and then you bring him back." But if he doesn't have a bad game, it's going to be interesting.
It really will. You're right.
Yeah. It is.
Les, I need your take on this. John and I are well on record that we think Howie Roseman is probably still underrated. As good a job as he's done, and around the league, I think he gets a lot of props. But there are some still guys who question him here in Philadelphia because he wasn't a football guy. But here's one where I got a question. How much credit do we give Howie Roseman for Nick Morrow? Because he's the second-ranked linebacker in the league right now. The Eagles cut him. They said, "See you later, bye." They signed him to a free agent contract, a very team-friendly free agent contract with no guaranteed money, which was a very good job by Howie Roseman. I give him a nod for that. But can you now take a bow for Nicholas Morrow being the second best linebacker in the NFL when you cut him coming into the season? I
hadn't thought about that,
doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well,
I'm not giving him credit. I'll tell you that. I'm not giving him credit.
I'd give the bow, if there is a bow to be given, I'd give it to the scout that I'm sure Howie wasn't the guy pouring over the film saying, this Nicholas Morrow guy might help us, so I don't know.
Here's who I'll give the credit to. Nicholas Morrow.
That's a good person to give
There's
it
a new idea. Let's actually give the credit to the player who's playing as highly
I mean, you can't cut a guy. And remember, not only did they cut him, they didn't sign him immediately to the practice squad. Now, that might have been
he went home.
Nick.
Yeah, that might have been him.
That might have been Nick saying, "All right, let me wait and see if somebody needs a linebacker on a 53." So it could have been from his end too. But they didn't even bring him back right away on the practice squad. As you mentioned, Les, he went home and, then he came back and he's forced into action and he's playing well. I can't give Howie too much credit for that. Nick Morrow does deserve the credit. But it is interesting, and I think we can already fast forward to April and curtail the linebacker talk in the first and second round. Because I mentioned this to Jody on text message. He's emboldened by this. Oh, I can put anybody at linebacker. Zach Cunningham showed up in August. Nick Morrow, I cut him. I brought him back.
I wouldn't rule second round out. I mean, they've done that. They haven't done it recently. They used to do it a lot, actually. 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, they used to draft second round linebackers quite a bit. Just what they wouldn't do it first round. I would not, I don't know what Sean Desai really thinks, but I think he'll have a lot to do with that discussion. I wouldn't rule out a second round linebacker. They need to. Nakobe Dean was third round and probably could have gone higher. I think they do want to lay a foundation there at some point.
Yeah, they drafted Davion in the third round, didn't work out. It's not like they won't take a premium pick on a linebacker. They've done it 2 times over the past few years.
Just won't do first round.
No.
And I get to, when I was still working, I got to do the roll out the Jerry Robinson story every. The first time I called him was like 10 years ago, and he had no idea. He was like amazed. Wow, really?
Yeah.
But he's still on, you can still get hold of Jerry anytime you want to do that story.
Yeah. And Jerry, ironically, Jerry was a hell of a player. It worked out.
Great player,
tremendously. But
he had played for the head coach at UCLA. So,
they knew him quite well. You mentioned his name. Give me your read. 4 games in. Sean Desai. good job, okay job, to be determined job, what the hell is he thinking job. Certainly it's different. And how many times John and I talked about this all summer. There'll be differences. You'll be able to see the difference between Gannon. We know that the head coach has his beliefs in defenses, and that's one of the reasons why Desai got the job. We knew it wasn't going to be a drastic change, but you could see where he would put his own touches on it. Right. Do you like the touches that Jonathan Gannon, that Sean Desai has added to Jonathan Gannon's former defense?
Until Sunday, I thought he was doing an excellent job. Sunday was not great, but again, the back end was a mess. You certainly can't complain about blitzing anymore. He does blitz. He blitzed a lot Sunday, and they do blitz a lot more than they did under Jonathan Gannon. I don't have any huge issues with, they wanted a Vic Fangio type defense. I think what John was alluding to a little while ago, there are some things about that sort of defense that you might not like, but that's what they're going to play. So, there's no discussion to really be had there. I can't complain about him. I think Sunday aside, they've done a very good job. I want to see. The first thing I thought of when I didn't notice Jalen Carter Sunday was, is he starting to get tired, or is he getting a little off the beam focus-wise? I want to make sure that he keeps these young guys in a 17-game NFL season. Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter were kind of the engine there for a few weeks. Is that going to be the case, long term, or are they going to kind of slide back a little bit? Jordan Davis did last year, but I don't. I makes sense to me so far. How do you guys feel? I'm okay with it.
I like the way he tries different things when things aren't going to plan. You mentioned the blitzing. He blitzed more than he has all season against Washington. I think that's because Sam Howell, right?
Yeah, and it worked in the second half. It worked.
Yeah, so I think that made a lot of sense. They were at, I was just looking it up, 30.4% blitz rate, way up from what they typically do. They're 21st in the league in blitzing. I was trying to look. I don't know where they were last year. I'm trying to look at. They were 22.1% blitz rate last year, 22.8% this year. And the only reason they're ahead is because of Sunday's game. So I don't think that's changed as much as people think. Still very similar from that.
Maybe they do a better job of it this year. You certainly
well, they certainly did on Sunday. Yeah, we talked about it. I mean, Nick Morrow had 3,600 NFL snaps somewhere in that range, and he had 4 career sacks. He had 3 sacks on Sunday. So they were very effective. So that part is certainly true. I don't think he's got as much talent on defense, so that has to factor into it. Now, I'm talking about the back seven, not the front seven. The front seven's unbelievable. Front 4, front defensive front. So it's kind of, I don't know where you want to grade him, but I like his ability to think out of the box, like Bradberry in the slot. I don't like it. I don't think it makes sense, but I respect his ability to think, all right, let me do some different things to try to fix this. Like I want to play an all-pro corner outside. That's why I'm paying him $13 million. So I don't necessarily agree with it, but I like, if I'm making sense, I like.
Well, given the choices that he has, I think Job on the outside is better than, you saw what happened when you tried to play Mario Goodrich. Side. Yeah. I think he thinks, okay, Bradberry can do this and Job can play outside. I don't have a problem with him trying to do it that way, given that that's what he has to work with.
Yeah. I like the willingness to try different things. And he did that in training camp. You saw him when he was dropping Nolan Smith or which didn't work out as well. But I like the willingness to throw the curveball. I am concerned, though, Mario Goodrich you bring up, Les, so let's talk about him. He didn't play well when he was forced into action against Minnesota. But, I mean, that's a good passing team. They haven't been good this year, but they can throw the ball. If you're not going to play him, why is he here? Like,
he's on special teams, I guess. But, yeah, he's just kind of like Ellis. He's like not in the scheme anymore.
And like this week, all of a sudden, you have the Sua injury. You don't have a backup center. Cam Jurgens is the backup center, not only is he the starting right guard. So you have to elevate people. They already have to elevate the punter. Britton Covey's out because he got a concussion, and no player in the entire NFL has been able to get through the protocol in 1 week. So
I hadn't noticed that. I read that last night. I hadn't. That you didn't used to be the case.
No,
I can tell you that
they've gotten way more stringent. So you might have to elevate Greg Ward. Who's going to be the backup center? Landon Dickerson?
I would guess so. Yeah, I think that's what you have to do. It'll be interesting because he hasn't done that in a while. I'm sure they're going to work on that in practice this week.
Now, do you just rely on Kelsey's always there, so Kelsey's going to play, and just cross your fingers?
I don't know what else you would do.
Well, you can go Brett Toth, Julian Good-Jones, but you'd have to elevate them.
Got to elevate them,
They have some other elevation issues. Or you could put Braden Mann on the 53. They could do that early.
That might be something you want to do, really. If you think he hasn't punted well.
No, he hasn't punted well.
If you thought he was your punter, then you would do that, but I don't know. I do think, though, we're seeing again the biggest thing, even though the Eagles are 4-0, the biggest thing that keeps teams from getting back when they've been there is injuries. And we've already seen there's another stat that I read that last year the Eagles offensive line missed a piddling amount of games. I think it was like 3 or 4 games total. 2 guys had like 1 or 2 game injuries. Well, now you've got Jurgens. He's probably going to be down for 8 weeks, at least, something like that.
Well, they can put if it's going to be that long, they'll just put him on IR. And then at least you create a roster spot.
Right. But my point is, you're seeing these injuries now this year, with Avonte Maddox. You're seeing these injuries that in so far not to Jalen Hurts yet, or AJ Brown, or Darius Slay, but you're seeing the injury thing creep in, and it's already a bigger deal than it was last year.
All right, last thing for me, and I've got an issue with the coach.
Okay.
It might be an uh-oh. Yeah, our streamers are going to have to decide for themselves. During the offseason, I remember vividly the coach talking about his quarterback after he signed the big contract. And they asked him about Jalen running the football. And his quote was, "Why would I take away his superpower?" Quote unquote. That's what Nick Sirianni said when asked about Jalen running the ball. Now that he's a $250 million guy. Why would I take away his superpower? Well, in watching the first 4 games, I would say his superpower at best has been reduced, if not taken away. And yesterday, Nick specifically went out of his way to say, we emphasize that he protect himself, that we want him to protect himself as a runner. Well, which one is it, Coach? Are you not going to take away his superpower, or are you going to reduce his superpower? I think there's a conflict of interest here.
Right. He had that one good 24-yard scramble late Sunday. That was it. I mean, and the design quarterback runs are just a disaster right now.
Yeah.
Because he sort of tiptoed, in my view, and maybe I'm being totally unfair, but in my view, he tiptoes up to the line, and the first time he sees the defender, he sits down. They ran a quarterback draw, and he wanted no part of it. I mean, it looked like to me, and maybe that's a really, unsophisticated view, but I don't. This is a question that I have. I mean, Jalen Hurts played a great game in many respects Sunday. His passing was tremendous. You know, the 2 touchdowns, the yardage. It was kind of back to normal, what we were kind of expecting going into the season. But this business of just sitting down at the line of scrimmage is not what we expected going into the season. I don't expect him to lower his head and bull through linebackers, but he isn't right now. He looks like one of those traditional quarterback kind of guys that doesn't run, you know, and every now and then he shakes it off and goes, but it's, you know, even if he's like scrambling, he'll just run out of bounds after 1 yard or something. You know, I mean, it's like he doesn't want to do this, or he thinks he shouldn't do this. And I'm not sure he's Jalen Hurts, you know, playing this way.
At Les Bowen, make sure you follow Les on X. He's retired, but not totally. You got to listen to the Bowen on the Birds podcast each week, wherever you get your finer podcasts. Les, any big names coming up? You always get big names, Les.
You know, I haven't set up this week yet. They've got the Rams, so I have a couple people in LA that I'd like to touch base with. It's going to be tough from getting an Eagles writer this week, because I think they scheduled Locker Room right in the middle of my podcast.
Yeah.
How can they? Don't they know who I am? You know, but I'll figure something out.
Okay, at Les Bowen, and they do know. They probably are trying to tweak you, Les. I think they tweak us all the time with this schedule, and they do things the way they do things purposefully at times. That's a hat tip to Howie Roseman. Well done, Howie. Bowen on the Birds. Last one. Who's going to win the game? We're not going to talk about you. Are they going to 5-0? They always find ways to win. You got to give them credit. They looked disjointed at times, but there's only 2 teams, Les, that are 4-0. 21-1 we are now over the last 22 starts, I believe, with Jalen Hurts.
In the immediate aftermath of that Sunday game, I would have said they're losing next week. This is going to, you know, they can't go on like this. It's going to bite them in the butt. The Rams, I don't know.
They're better than I thought.
Yeah, but I don't.
Yeah, they're not good.
No,
and by the way, that place is going to be what, 50,000 Eagles fans?
Yeah,
at least
exactly.
More than half.
Yeah.
So I haven't made a pick yet, but I might end up picking the Eagles, maybe not to cover, but you know, the cowardly.
And Matthew Stafford's banged up. He got hurt last week. I think he's.
And I don't like their offensive line very much. You know, so I don't know. They could lose. I mean, the way they're playing right now, the Eagles, they could lose, but you have to think they're the better team, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jake Elliott game-winning field goal. That's all you need to know. When in doubt,
we didn't even bring up Jake.
And Jake out there to kick the game-winning field goal. You got that in your back pocket. All right, here's my last question, Les, because, again, like John said, we're not going to have you on between now and next week. I don't know if we'll probably have you on at least once before the trade deadline. 3 choices, A, B, C. A, Derek Barnett is still here 4 weeks from now. B, Derek Barnett is traded for some draft compensation, even if it's a 6th in exchange for a 7th or somewhere there, and that's all I think they're going to get. Or the Eagles finally say, yeah, we just need to move on. We kind of need the roster spot, and we actually think more of Contavious Street than Derek Barnett, because Contavious Street is performing more than Derek Barnett. He might not be as ingratiated with the organization as Derek Barnett is, but if they pull that curtain back and go, who's actually helping us more, it's Contavious Street. If we got to cut somebody because we got roster issues like McMullen and McDonald are always talking about on Birds 365, Derek, sorry, we got to let you go. Which of those 3 things is most likely to happen? He's here and he's still getting his unproductive snaps. He's traded for some minimal compensation, or he's told your services are no longer needed. A, B, or C?
You know, I think he got more snaps Sunday than he's been getting lately. Of course, they played 78 defensive snaps. That might have had something to do with it.
Yeah.
I like your trade scenario. If anybody wants him, I don't know who that would be, but there's
a lot of bad teams out there.
That's really true. There are teams he could play for. There's no doubt about that. I'll go with the trade scenario. I don't know. they don't seem to have a problem running him out there. So I'm skeptical that we'll be right about that. But I'd prefer the trade scenario.
I think everybody would, but I said a 7th for a 6th. Not even just a 7th round pick, but you get a 6th in exchange for a 7th. That's about how much he's worth on the trade market.
Yeah.
If some team gets desperate, maybe you can pull that off, Harry Roseman. But don't be expecting massive returns. We always get massive returns when we bring Les Bowen on our show. Les, thank you much for doing it today.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
Thank you, Les.
Our pleasure. In front of the red brick wall, he is Les Bowen.
Remember the old days? We would be in front of the Comedy Store brick wall.
Red brick background.
Before the great Ocean Casino Resort backgrounds.
And I like the red brick, but I got to tell you, it's not the Ocean's Casino. I like being down the shore better than being in front of the red brick. But
much better. Speaking of bad football teams, how bad are the New York Football Giants? My God, what? They played one good quarter of football. That's it. I even said yesterday they can't play as poorly as they have been playing. Oh yeah, they can.
Oh,
they were even worse.
They can, and they did. Their offensive line is a sieve. And Aikman made the point last night on the broadcast, which was dead on accurate. I've been making it for years, going back to their previous general manager, Dave Gettleman. The first thing he said, I was on the air in New York the day that he was hired, as a matter of fact, or he did his introductory press conference. And he used a word that I had never heard before, hog mollies.
Hog mollies, yeah.
Referring to guys in the trenches. Oh, by the way, Eagles' big hog molly squad. They don't call it that, but they are. They believe you build from the trenches out. And that's exactly what Gettleman said. We need to get ourselves some hog mollies up front. And from the time he took over into him being gone, the Giants have tried.
Yeah,
they have put resources and allocations into the offensive line, but you gotta kind of be able to pick the right guys, and they don't ever. Their offensive line is a sieve. It's terrible, and it's not because they ignore it. No, they have attempted to fix it many different times in many different ways. They just stink at picking the right players.
Jeff Stoutland. I mean, you're right. Evan Neal. I mean, what the hell happened to Evan Neal? That's a talented kid. I mean, it's not like, oh, the Giants picked him, whatever, 7th overall, and nobody else was going to take him. I mean, he was a big time player coming out of college. Andrew Thomas has turned into, but that's it. I remember they drafted Will Hernandez in the 2nd round. He did nothing. They've tried, and they can't develop offensive
money
linemen.
on who's the free agent offensive lineman they got from New England? Paid him. I think they made him the highest paid guard when they signed him in free agency 3 or 4 years ago. Slater. What was the name of the kid? It was former Patriot. And they paid him good money. They went aggressively after him in free agency, and he stunk. He came to New York and went from being a borderline all-pro guy in New England, and he couldn't even keep his job in New York. So you are so right, John, when you say Stoutland University. It's not only evaluation and being able to acquire the right player. Then you got to be able to coach him up and get the most out of him. And Stoutland does that better.
I'm just looking. They this year they took John Michael Schmitz in the 2nd round. Matt Pert a couple years ago in the 3rd round. You met Neal and Thomas are high level 1st round picks. Thomas has worked out. They took another kid in the 3rd round. I mean, they're taking a bunch. Half of their offensive line is either 1st, 2nd, or 3rd round picks, and
day 1, day 2.
Stink. Yeah,
they're just flat out terrible, and that's a good thing because the Eagles got them twice. Now, I'd like to be playing them now if I were the Eagles because they're struggling so badly right now, and maybe they get better before weeks 15 and 18 because that's when the Eagles play them. They don't play them until December/January, but. I think the Giants are a complete non-factor in the division this year. He's McMullen. I'm McDonald. We are your Mac and Mac guys. Quickie timeout. Come back. We've got Dave Zangaro of NBC Sports Philadelphia scheduled to join us in just over 10 minutes. Stay there.
If you own a company and you're not producing a podcast, you're missing out. The public consumes messaging when they're ready. Join the professional podcast network of companies and let JAKIB Media Partners put you in the podcast arena. Come to our professional studio, or we'll come to your place of business and professionally produce your company podcast. Call JAKIB Media right now at 267-261-3428. 267-261-3428.
My name is Dr. Bruce Grossinger, and I'm the medical director of Philadelphia PRP and Stem Cell Institute. I'm reaching out to those who suffer from spine and joint pain. We use treatment methods that require no surgery, no scalpel, no drugs.
Running, walking, or whatever your desires are, Dr. Grossinger is where you need to come.
You can benefit from the same PRP and stem cell treatment as Wilbert Montgomery. Call us now at 610-222-5675.
Score and save in southeastern PA and Delaware with Colony Pools this football season, and let the experts close your pool with a custom Merlin safety cover in green for the birds. And if you join our Winter Watch team, we'll give you another 20% off, and Colony Pools will handle it all. Keep your tiles on your pool, not in your pool. Fly with Colony right now, Birds fans. Visit flywithcolony.com. EAGLES, Eagles.
All right, back in the Big Young Bird 365. Tip of the cat to Les Bowen for jumping in with us. Always fun to have Les on. I want to address one of our streamers. I want to thank Paul Mancini, but he's a little slow on the uptick. I was able to Google quicker than Paul was able to jump on the screen and tell me the Patriot offensive lineman that I couldn't remember, Nate Soldier.
Oh, Nate Soldier, yeah.
Who, when the Giants signed him, and with the Patriots, he played, I think it was on the right-hand side, either right tackle or right guard. And they decided they were going to bring him over and make him a left tackle. It wasn't his position with New England. He was a very good, like I said, a Pro Bowl level offensive lineman. But they move him to a different position, the biggest position, the most important position. Pay him the way you're supposed to pay left tackles when he signed the day signed. Highest paid left tackle in the National Football League. He did diddly squat for the Giants. I thought it was more recent. It does go back to 2014. So I feel better about not being able to remember who it was, because it was all the way of 9 years ago. But that's what the Giants have made the effort to upgrade. They realize they stink on the offensive line. They just can't figure out a way to upgrade it. They know they have to, but they haven't been able to. And that's why I cut Daniel Jones some slack. You know, I'm not a Daniel Jones fan. You're not a Daniel Jones fan. The Giants got caught between a rock and a hard place. Either you go rebuild and get a rookie quarterback, or you overpay for Jones. They chose to go down that road. Mistake. But I'm not putting it on him last night. I knew he threw a bad pick six.
It looked like Brian Daboll was putting it on him. Boy, he looked disgusted. Did you see the one video where he threw the Microsoft Surface? I like to, for the NFL's sake, everybody calls it an iPad, but he threw it in disgust.
Right, but here's, and I guess I'm defending Daniel Jones. Didn't know that I was going to go there today. We know Daboll was disgusted. Do you know for sure he wasn't disgusted at the horrendous offensive play of their offensive line?
It's possible, I guess. Yeah, I mean, it was just a bad visual, because he went right up to Daniel Jones, showed him something on the tablet, and just threw it in disgust. Yeah, it could have been something else. You never know.
Because Daniel Jones had no chance last night. He's dropping back, and within 2.8 seconds, somebody was draped all over him last night. The Seattle rush was getting home in the blink of an eye. That's how bad the Giants' offensive line was.
I forget how much money Daniel Jones got on his extension.
Oh, 40 plus million per.
Yeah. The total number 160, 4 years, 160.
Yeah.
He should give 80 million of that to Ed Donatel because he single-handedly in 2 games got Daniel Jones that contract. I tweeted this morning, I said, and I say it all the time, and you probably remember me saying it, the hardest thing to do in the NFL for a GM executive is to be honest about what they have, about their own team, be completely honest. And Joe Shane, who I liked and I thought did a great job in year one, he bought into fool's gold, man. That was a terrible defense. Everybody knew it was a terrible defense. And the Giants played in it. And you look at they win the playoff game against Ed Donatel. Then they come into Philadelphia. The Eagles had the easiest time in the world shutting down that offense. They paid more attention to the crappy defense that everybody scored on versus when he went up against a good defense and couldn't do anything. They just misevaluated. They weren't honest with themselves.
Yeah, and since the day he was drafted, I didn't think Daniel Jones deserved to be drafted as high as he did. I think the Giants over-evaluated him, and now they're paying an even bigger price. Now, somebody said last night, I think it was on a broadcast, it could screw them for the next 5 to 10 years. You move on. You can take it down and build it back up within 2 years if you do it right, if you make all the right moves. Yeah. But it doesn't push into purgatory for a decade. That was
only if you keep doubling down. They have to be honest again and say, you know what, we made a mistake and move on. Yeah. And they're going to be in a position to do it probably because they're one of the worst teams in football. So, they might not get Caleb Williams, but they're going to be in a position to get a top-tier quarterback, and they can't say, oh, they got to do the Carson Wentz. They got to say, we made a mistake. Let's move on.
They may go down that road. All right, one quickie before we punch up Dave Zangaro, because speaking of tweeting, you said you tweeted out. I tweeted this out as soon as the game was over the other day, and then yesterday it was addressed. Nick Sirianni did not watch the game-winning field goal go through the uprights. He turned and looked at. I didn't even know.
He never watches field goals.
That's what he said yesterday, and I had no idea that was the case. You're there every week. Did you ever notice him? Are you watching the action on the field? You ever peek over at Sirianni?
I knew. I knew he didn't. He didn't.
He said yesterday, I do that all the time.
Yeah,
Nick Sirianni. What I tweeted was Nick Sirianni was so confident that his field goal kicker was making the game-winning kick. He didn't even think he needed to look at it. Apparently, does this all the time. Did you know that?
I did know it. I don't pay attention to it because I'm looking at the kick. But yeah, I've noticed it before. And he tries to bend over backwards. It's obviously superstition. He's like, I'm not a superstitious guy, but it's. Yeah, you are. That's why you don't watch the kicks.
You are.
There's nothing wrong with it. He doesn't watch them, and he looks at Michael Clay, and Michael gives him the thumbs up. It's typically the thumbs up with Jake Elliott. But yeah, he mentioned it could be construed as not having confidence in Jake Elliott. It's just a weird quirk. I mean, a lot of people don't watch field goals. I've noticed. Fans, I'm like, you're the head coach. You can watch the field goal, dude. Watch it.
I had no idea that was the case. They just caught him right on TV, and I said, holy mackerel, he didn't even watch.
No.
Apparently does it all the time. I did not know that. I thought
it
was something to note on Twitter, and then I found out yesterday, yeah, Jody, why weren't you paying attention the other 2+ years that Nick Sirianni's been
Well, you're usually looking at the field goal.
Yeah, I'm a slave to the television.
And they don't show the coach a lot. You can't see it watching on television.
No, I can't. But I will be in attendance in a couple of weeks when the Eagles and the Jets do battle at MetLife Stadium. So I'll keep an eye on Sirianni on the game. I don't think it's going to be a great watch from a Jet fan perspective. All right, he's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. We are the Mac and Mac Birds 365 guys. We just had Les Bowen on with us. We go next to Dave Zangaro. He of NBC Sports Philadelphia, scheduled to jump on in with us here on Birds 365.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
At Pond Lehocky, we've recovered billions of dollars for our clients, and we're confident we can do the same for you. With over 250 years of combined courtroom experience, we've helped over 100,000 injured clients obtain some of the largest settlements in Pennsylvania. One conversation is all it takes to help you and your family get back on track. If you've been injured in an accident, give Pond Lehocky a call.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Staffing is not easy, but that's what we do every day, all day. The key to our success is storytelling, asking the right questions to find the right people. Hi, I'm Gary Kane, president of Kane Partners. We want to be your staffing partner.
Since 1977, it's always been about you, the community, at Rafferty Subaru. And through the Subaru Love Promise, we prove we care by supporting charities like So Good Now.
Zangaro helps kids in under-resourced areas by connecting them with student athletes to serve as mentors. We remove barriers so athletes can help youth in the corners of our communities where light and love are needed most.
When you choose Rafferty Subaru, you help organizations like So Good Now.
It's all about you at Rafferty Subaru.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
For the big story on Action News,
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Mac Birds 365 get together. We are joined by a guy who's going hoodie on us today. He looks good. He looks like he's ready to ball out. Dave Zangaro, get in there. Eagles are down. Safeties. You got to give us a helping hand. You ready?
Yeah.
I don't know if that'd be a good move. I might have one snap in me until I snap, but I'd give it a go.
I think you got one snap in you, Dave. But the key is, I want to know, do you watch field goals when Jake Elliott lines up?
I do. And it's funny, though, like you watch them, you're just watching to watch, and you kind of expect them to make them.
Oh, yeah. I had no doubt. 54. I'm like, but I see it. Graham Cano. That's the only thing the Giants can do is kick field goals. I think he made a 50. It's amazing how good these kickers have gotten. And Jake's one of them. I mean, that was closer to splitting the uprights than it was wide left or wide right. And it's 54 yards away. It's like nothing. It's amazing.
Yeah. It's, David Akers is the best kicker in Eagles history, but like, this is different. It's like a different position than it was when Akers did it. Like, to see Jake is 10 for 16 on field goals of that deep.
And I think he's 6 of his last 7. So it's taken off. And I can't really explain it. But I think it was funny the way Nick said, well, I'm not really a superstitious guy, but then he was incredibly superstitious. But there are bigger things to deal with this team, Dave. And number one is they are 4-0. There's only 2 teams that can say that. So that's pretty impressive. But I mean, there's a lot of things you can nitpick. And what was your, if you had to pick one thing out and say, this just isn't good enough, what would it be?
From the game or overall?
Overall.
Overall, I think if the Jalen hasn't looked like Jalen. Like if I look at just that one game, I think, secondary is a problem. There's not enough talent there, which I think is a real problem without Avonte Maddox and when you're banged up at safety. But overall, I think if the Eagles are going to go where we think they can go, it's going to be because Jalen Hurts is playing like an MVP candidate, and he hasn't done that yet. I thought there were some encouraging signs last week or this week on Sunday's game. Like I thought it was his best game so far, but he's still not looking like the guy he was from last year. And ultimately, like he needs to be that guy. He needs to be an MVP level player because yes, the roster is great around him, but he played up to that level last year, and it was a big reason why they almost won the whole thing. So if he's not that, then you start to wonder about where this team is actually going. So you need to see more from him. He needs to be more consistent. Was encouraged by what I saw on Sunday afternoon.
All right, 2 follow-up things. First, on the field goal kicking, the automatic individual that Elliott's become. Got to give credit to a buddy of mine, Joe Cornick, who tweeted this to me last night. How much did the NFL change in over 40 years? Mark Mosley in 1982 was the MVP of the National Football League. He never made a field goal over 48 yards the entire year. He got MVP, but he didn't make one over 48. And now guys come out for 55 yards. We go, I'll put those points on the board.
By the way, Mark Mosley was a straight ahead kicker too.
Right.
He wasn't even a soccer style kicker. So
for Washington, aka used to be the Redskins. All right, your follow up on Jalen Hurts. We just talked about this last hour. Last year, I remember succinctly when the Jalen Hurts contract signing came down. Nick Sirianni said, when asked about will he run less this upcoming year now that he's locked up for $250 million, is that going to be the case? He said, why would I take away his superpower? I watched these first 4 games, and I think they've handcuffed his superpower. He just doesn't look like the same running quarterback. You said MVP status, Dave. How much of him being a running in the MVP last year was because how effective he was running the football? Is that an element that the Eagles are missing this year?
Yeah, they're missing a little bit. He looks uncomfortable at times when he takes off the run. And I think it's always going to be a balance with him of like trying to figure out when he can take off, when he should slide, when he should fight for yards. And so far, he's looked uncomfortable at certain times. There'll be like he'll escape a pressure. You think he's about to take off, and then he'll slide for 0 yards, and you go, well, you didn't need to do that, but like over like the long term part of it, I think is valid. And Nick Sirianni brought it up on Monday that long term they do want him to protect himself. They want him to take care of his body. I think at times he's been able to pick and choose, and he's done a good job choosing when to invite some contact when he needs to, when there's a gotta have it situation. He'll play it a little differently, which is good. We haven't seen the chunk yardage on the ground. We saw that 124-yard run, and that was vintage. We're like, that looks like
exactly.
I was starting to wonder if he was fast, like as fast as he's been, because he didn't look it. And I think he is as fast as he's ever been. I think it's just he's a little more tentative to do it and to invite that contact. And we've seen that. And I start to wonder if that has taken over in the pocket a little bit. Some of the uncomfortable looks he's shown in the pocket. I wonder if that's part of the whole mindset. And if it is, like you gotta figure out how to work through that, because ultimately I agree with the philosophy that he has to limit the hits he takes to be this franchise's long-term franchise quarterback. But there has to be a balance. And I agree with you, Jody, that like he has not looked like the running threat he has been in the past. And I understand the threat of it is still effective, but if he doesn't start running, you lose some of that effect.
Now, I do give some credit to the opposition, Dave. They're clearly playing a lot of zone. A lot of teams have spied them. They have their eyes on Jalen Hurts at all times. And and that has limited his ability to run at least a little bit. So I think the opposition has changed somewhat in how they try to play him. Jody brings up Superpower. I always go back to Nick saying, we're not paying him more to do less after he signed his contract. And he kind of did a 180 yesterday and said, well, we talk about, he's got to protect himself. Do you think the way he's handled it and the way Nick was talking, is that more about protecting Jalen Hurts in a different way and saying, this hasn't been effective. I'm going to try to spin this the best way possible? Because I do think the Eagles as a whole want that running threat back in their offense as quickly as possible.
I would agree with you, except the eye test tells me that it is really Jalen trying to limit the hits. I agree that it's been ineffective, but I watch it and it tells me that it's not just that it's not working. It's that, he's avoiding the contact. He's sliding. And sometimes the slides, you have to remember, it's where you start the slides. So it's looking like, maybe he'll pick up a few yards, and then it's a no gainer, and you're in second down all of a sudden. I think at times he's shown good instincts to stay in the pocket, but there have been far too many times for me where it's been like a bad recipe, because he'll put his eyes down and start to run, and then remember, oh wait, I can't get hit, and slide. So you had all these plays that maybe you buy some time in the pocket, you throw someone open, or you take off and run, and you're in the middle of that when you're so worried about getting hit that you end up kind of wasting downs. And we've seen that probably too much so far through 4 games.
All right, DZ, I need you to get into the classroom and give me a grade. And I am, for this specific question, going to tell you should be grading on the curve of expectations. Who got a worse grade on Sunday's game against the Commanders? Eagles secondary or Eagles defensive line?
Even with the curve, I'll say Eagles secondary. I thought the D-line was not as consistently good as it probably needed to be, but I did think they got some good pressure. We saw the edges get there a few times. We saw Brandon Graham get his hand on the quarterback's arm. Thought Jalen Carter gave really great effort. Thought Fletcher played a good game. Secondary, I understand they're playing with limited resources, but they were picking on Josh Jobe. They were picking on Terrell Edmonds. And I understand what your point there is. Like, there's way more talent on the D-line than the secondary, but they do work hand in hand. I think it was more on the secondary in that game.
Yeah. The MVP of the defense, the great Nicholas Morrow, who didn't see that coming, Dave? What a game. I think he had over 3,600 NFL snaps with 4 career sacks. He ends up with 3. Did something, I forget the number, 11 tackles, 3 sacks, 1 forced fumble. No Eagle had ever done that before. Seth Joyner brought it up to me after the show on our post-game show, and I dismissed him. And I'm starting to think myself. He said, at what point do we start saying, well, maybe Nicholas Morrow's better than Nakobe Dean? And I completely dismissed it, Dave. Why did I dismiss it? Do you dismiss it? Do we give too much deference to Nakobe Dean because of what he did at the college level?
Maybe we do. We haven't seen it at the NFL level, but look, I think Nicholas Morrow and Zach Cunningham have played well. Cunningham especially, honestly. They're not great in coverage. They're just not. Like, there's a reason you're blitzing Nicholas Morrow.
Yeah.
It's because you think you're better off with him blitzing than you are with him in coverage. Theoretically, Nakobe's going to be better in coverage, and you need that. You're going to need that down the stretch. We haven't seen it yet because we haven't seen him play yet. But they went into the season with him as the mic. They've said at every turn he's the guy. I have a hard time believing a couple of decent games from Nicholas Morrow is going to change that. So, I understand the point that Seth's making, and I don't want to take anything away from Morrow, but it's probably still Nakobe's job. The interesting thing is, do they only view Morrow as a middle linebacker, or will?
Yeah,
or
he's played on the weak side, so he could push Zach as well.
That's what I'm thinking. Is it like, do you have Nakobe at the mic, and then you have either Cunningham or Morrow battling for the will? I'll tell you what, Cunningham has impressed me. He was awful in week 1 to the point where I was like, get him off the field. He can't do anything. He's bounced back nicely, and he's been a fine player since then.
And I brought this up earlier. Need your take on it. We know how the Eagles just run guys in on the defensive line. Contavious Street somehow finds a way to get a couple snacks every week, and Derek Barnett finds a way to get snaps and accomplish absolutely nothing. But the linebacker position, last year it was the same two guys basically every single play. Nakobe Dean entire season gets 30 snaps. I call him on the carpet for it all the time. They never rotate their linebackers. If Dean comes back and is playing well, and Cunningham and Morrow have another good game again this week, why can't they rotate linebackers?
They could. The tricky thing is when you're running zone coverage like the Eagles do quite a bit, the continuity back there means a lot more than it does up front. Like up front, you got to worry about your rush lanes. You got to worry about a stunt here or there, but you can kind of mix and match and play different guys with different players. On the back end, that's where the continuity means more, because now you're worried about spacing, and now you're worried about, if I'm Nakobe, I need to know where Zach Cunningham is at all times. And so I think it's a little harder. I don't think it's impossible to rotate at linebacker, but I do think it makes it trickier. And you have to remember, in the secondary, they're already moving pieces around because you have James Bradberry going outside, inside. Then you have a safety on the field. You might have Sidney Brown at the slot. So there's already a bunch of moving pieces in the back seven. If I'm Sean Desai, I have to think, is it really worth it to rotate a linebacker and potentially screw up that continuity just because I got to shoehorn in some snaps for Nicholas Morrow? Like, I don't know if that's worth it.
Yeah, that's my biggest pet peeve. You've probably heard me say it at some point, Dave, about this Fangio-like scheme. The communication on the back end. I mean, when everybody is healthy and you have veteran savvy players like Slay and Bradberry, the Eagles did it better than anybody last year. 11, 12 teams that play that scheme. When you have younger players, all of a sudden you start to see coverage bust and guys who aren't used to playing. There's got to be a room for a tweak there when you have younger players and these moving parts. I don't get the Bradberry moving him into even a little bit. That is an all-pro outside corner. I mean, you're paying him $13 million for a reason. And he's your best option. I'm not saying that. He's a good player. He can handle it. He's held up well. But at what point, Stoutland talks about it on the offensive line, when you upset two positions, technically you're worse at slot and outside corner. What's your thought process on how they've handled that?
Yeah, I kind of agree with you a little bit there, because I don't think you're getting all out of James Bradberry that you can when you're playing him inside. He's best suited to play outside corner. And I think situationally, I get it. And that's kind of what I go back to in training camp. I thought, yeah, this makes sense in some games to play him inside against some
Kelsey,
bigger
Hawkinson, if he was healthy, glorified Mike Evans. Yeah, put him in there. But
yeah, like Darren Waller, who can't catch a football anymore, apparently. Like those types of players, it made sense to me. As it being like a full-time thing, I don't think it's a good idea. The problem is the Eagles clearly don't trust Mario Goodrich, which, I don't know why he's on the roster. If he's your backup nickel, your nickel gets hurt and he doesn't play, what are we doing here? They clearly trust Josh Jobe more, and maybe Jobe will get a lot better as the season goes on, but he's not going to turn into James Bradberry, and James Bradberry is probably never going to be as good as Avonte Maddox as a nickel. So this is a spot where I would look around the league. I would really canvass the league and try to shake free a veteran who you can just plug and play at that nickel corner spot. I think that's worth it, because right now this whole thing is in flux. I like Sidney in there at times. I don't think he's going to just be your your starting nickel. I don't think that's going to be good or fair to him. So I would look around.
Cooper Kupp's supposed to come back this week.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's going to be healthy, but when you get that traditional slot receiver, that short area quickness guy, that's doing a disservice to James Bradberry and Sidney Brown.
Yeah, they can't cover those guys, or at least like they shouldn't have to. You should have a nickel, and if it's not Mario Goodrich, go find a guy who can do it.
Yeah.
All right, Dave, one of my favorite, probably my all-time favorite football rhyme, and I would give credit to whoever said it, but I don't know who that is. Maybe you can tell me. For preseason football analysis, you can't make the club in the tub, meaning if you're hurt, you're not going to be able to make the team. I'm going to try one of my own here. Tell me what you think. You can't be elite on your seat. How are the Eagles winning without the elite Quez Watkins? It's just...
I didn't know where you're going with that.
Okay. If I need to explain it, I'll explain it. But both Quez, first the coach went out of his way to tell us, you guys are missing out. Quez Watkins is looking great. You're looking for a breakout star here this year. You better be watching Quez Watkins. And then Quez doubles down and calls himself elite, despite his 2 receptions so far this year. 2 receptions for Quez. The Eagles are doing just fine. How are they able to overcome not having Quez, the elite Quez Watkins in this lineup?
Yeah, Alameda 0 catches last week, really. Look, it's the 3rd receiver option. They can't even get Dallas Goedert the ball.
Yeah.
So there's probably not going to be much meat on that bone for Quez or Alameda or whoever else it is. Yeah, he's been hurt. Yeah, I get your point there. I think the delta between him and Alameda is a lot smaller than it was. I wouldn't be surprised to see, even when Quez is back, them have Alameda out there. I think he deserves some more looks, but I don't have much to say on Quez. He's been hurt the last couple games.
Yeah. Dallas, you mentioned, I asked Nick that yesterday. We're at, we can't say quarter pole anymore because they play 17 games, but
you know how much that bugs me, John?
All three of us.
Yeah, it drives me insane. But it is a small sample size. That's what Nick said. It's getting, it's getting late early.
Is it? Is it a small
No, I don't think it is. They can't get them to freaking football. Yeah. What the heck is going on with Dallas Goedert?
Yeah, it's all relative, but it's not a small sample size. We're 4 games in. He plays every snap just about.
Right.
And he hasn't been involved in the offense. I do agree with Nick that it's been like a few different factors. I don't think it's just one thing, but they have to figure out a way to get in the ball. They've done that for AJ. They've done that for Devontae. And if he's the 3rd part of that, and that goes in no particular order, then you have to get him involved. They didn't pay him 4 years, $57 million to be a blocking tight end, even though he's good at blocking. He needs to catch the ball more. And we've seen them make a concerted effort to get AJ involved early in games, which I think is a very good idea. You want to engage AJ Brown, but you can do that for Dallas. You can manufacture touches for Dallas Goedert. He's so good after the catch. I'm fine with running the tight end screen. Yeah, there's a chance you take a negative play, but he has such great potential to turn it into a big play. I'd run those here and there. He has to be more involved. Point blank, period.
All right, Dave, I'm going to ask you to make a prediction on Sunday's game, and it has nothing to do with the final score. Okay. The Eagles are going to have to do some roster juggling coming into this contest because if Jurgens is going to be out, all right, you just plug in Sewell Patton. He did a damn good job this past week. That's great. What happens if Jason Kelce turns an ankle? And we know he's just a warrior and he never comes out, but stuff does happen. Guys get hurt. Somebody's got to snap the ball to Jalen Hurts. If they've got to use a roster elevation this week from the practice squad, is it to replace Britton Covey if he can't clear concussion protocol?
And nobody can this year. He's not clearing protocol. I mean, nobody has in the entire league. So they need a punt returner too, Dave.
Yeah, it's going to come down. So you figure you have one elevation, that's the punter. You have to elevate the punter. You got to have the punter on the team, even though he hasn't been great. Yeah, you have to have someone to punt the football. Then it comes down to, do you want a Kelsey replacement, or do you want a punt returner? The punt returner would be Greg Ward.
Correct.
The punt returner on the roster would be Olamide Zaccheaus. At center, I think your elevation would be Julian Good-Jones. It would not be Brett Toth. He couldn't snap the football in the summer. That's a problem. It would be Julian Good-Jones. Or, I mean, your options on the roster are pretty limited. You have Landon Dickerson, who did it in college a little bit. And that's really it. I mean, Jack Driscoll, I know when he was coming out of Auburn, learned how to snap a football, but I don't think he's done it since. I think in like a quick few plays, you'd be fine getting by with with Dickerson, but not ideal. I think it'll come down to, do they feel like they have a better replacement on the 53 for center or for punt returner, and then vice versa. And I think they'll try to weigh it out like that.
Don't let me ask you to wait. You didn't give me an answer. Come on, Zangaro, you're in the coach's seat. Make the call. Which are you elevating?
What was the question? Who am I elevating? Julian Good-Jones.
Yeah,
right,
Julian. You got to have a backup center, even though Kelsey's never.
You have to have that safety net. You have to.
Yeah, you can send Olamide back there and say, "Hey, fair catch that football."
Yeah.
The problem is you're also going into a game with 4 receivers. This is where the roster gymnastics gets tricky when you've been playing this game with the punter all season.
Yeah. Any chance? That's what I was about to say. Braden Mann has not been impressive punting the football.
Although his last punt was good.
Yeah, his last punt was good. Any chance they speed it up and they just put him on the 53, or if Juergens is going to miss 4 games, they could put him on IR.
Yeah, that's the thing. We'll see if that roster spot opens up.
Yeah.
If it does, then they'll just sign Julian Good-Jones to the active roster and go from there. I think there's a chance that happens.
Yeah.
We'll see. Yeah. We'll see. Like, once Ken gets a few days away from that game, we'll see how he's looking. But it is the tricky part. You have these elevations, and the Eagles have been really playing around with it, having their punter. The teams aren't doing this, right? Like, teams have a punter on their 53. And I agree with you, man, hasn't been good. But that last punt was actually really great.
The last punt was solid.
It was 47 yards down to the 7?
Yeah. And that was a big punt.
Yeah, maybe he's turning a corner.
Yeah, possibly. At D Zangaro NBCS. Follow Dave on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it these days. Does a tremendous job. Watch him on NBC Sports Philadelphia. One of the best in the biz. I'll end it here with you, Dave, from my perspective. A lot of Nick got a lot of questions because that's where we are. They keep winning games. It's hard to, but there were some issues. Do you try to drain the clock? Do you think that was Jalen Hurts, or was that a Brian Johnson play call going for the touchdown? They give the time back to the dreaded Sam Howell. I didn't have a problem with that because your defense is going to hold up. The 3rd and 11 with Kenny Gainwell. Situational play calling. Where are you with the Eagles coming out of that game?
Yeah, there's some real questions. A 3rd and 11 run that Kenny Gainwell in the red zone. No.
And he fumbled, by the way.
Yeah,
it wasn't
Mr. Reliable.
That
to me, that was the most egregious one. As far as, look, I would have tried to run the clock out and kick the field goal to win in regulation. I understand Nick's point that, like, we'll never apologize for scoring points or whatever. Yeah. I get that. You expect your defense to be able to hold, but you had watched them not hold. You had watched them struggle against Sam Howell, who, by the way, isn't awful. Honestly, the most egregious coaching decision was from the other sideline.
Ron Rivera's got to go for 2.
Like, what are we doing, Ron Rivera? Yeah. Riverboat.
Yeah, I've stripped him of that nickname. He can no longer
he lost it. I mean, what are you doing? You're an 8.5 point underdog. You got a chance to win this game
on the road.
Your reasoning is that your guys are gassed. It's even more of a reason to not send it to over. It made no sense. It still makes no sense. That was egregious.
Yeah. I'm with you.
I'm with you, Dave, in that I would have just gone for a first down and then a field goal and not even taken it into overtime. And I do believe they had a great ISO camera on him that when Patrick Mahomes got up from sliding down at the 2-yard line, I think I saw him say Sirianni. That
Oh.
don't always have to score. As
By the
many
way,
points
Patrick
as possible.
Mahomes got outplayed by Zach Wilson. Who didn't see that coming?
But much like the Eagles, they won, right? The Kansas City Chiefs did win the game.
Good teams win games like that.
Yeah.
That's what you need to do. Need to win games like that. All right, Dave, last thing. Who's going to LA? You, Rube, or both?
I'll be going. Yeah. Rube doesn't go anywhere.
Rube's got to do the post-game show.
Yeah, he's got to do the post game.
Right. Well, then
have you been to SoPa yet? Have you been?
I haven't. I'm excited to see it.
Yeah.
Cool. Safe trip, my friend. Thank you very much for jumping in with us today. We'll get you on in a couple of weeks. Appreciate it, bud.
All right, guys. Take care.
Nice, Dave.
Dave Zangaro, NBC Sports Philly, here with us on Birds 365. All right, on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel, coming up in less than 10 minutes, we have a new show that is debuting today, the Philly Sports Power Hour with Bill Carullo, who you've seen here on Birds 365. Done a real nice job jumping in, filling in for Johnny Mack when he needs to run over to South Philly for Eagles responsibilities. Big Bill getting his own show, the Philly Sports Power Hour, coming up in less than 10 minutes here on Birds 365. We'll come back and put a bow on this show.
If you own a company and you're not producing a podcast, you're missing out. The public consumes messaging when they're ready. Join the professional podcast network of companies and let JAKIB Media Partners put you in the podcast arena. Come to our professional studio or we'll come to your place of business and professionally produce your company podcast. Call JAKIB Media right now at 267-261-3428. 267-261-3428.
My name is Dr. Bruce Grosinger, and I'm the medical director of Philadelphia PRP and Stem Cell Institute. I'm reaching out to those who suffer from spine and joint pain. We use treatment methods that require no surgery, no scalpel, no drugs.
Running, walking, or whatever your desires are, Dr. Grosinger is where you need to come.
You can benefit from the same PRP and stem cell treatment as Wilbert Montgomery. Call us now at 610-222-5675.
Score and save in southeastern PA and Delaware with Colony Pools this football season, and let the experts close your pool with a custom Merlin safety cover in green for the birds. And if you join our Winter Watch team, we'll give you another 20% off, and Colony Pools will handle it all. Keep your tiles on your pool, not in your pool. Fly with Colony right now, Birds fans. Visit flywithcolony.com. EAGLES, Eagles.
All right, last couple of minutes for 365, and then get ready for the new show here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel, Philly Sports Power Hour with Bill Carullo, coming up in just over 5 minutes from now. All right, Johnny Mack, what do you got on the docket today?
Coordinator day. Little Sean Desai, Brian Johnson, Michael Clay. We get to hear Michael Clay talk about Nick not watching field goals. I imagine he'll get a lot of questions about that.
But he's not going to tell you who's going to be returning punts on Sunday.
No.
Yeah. That's not an answer you'll be getting on Tuesday. That you're going to have to wait for at least to the weekend, if not later than that. And Desai, I'm interested to see if Desai says, I'll be blitzing more going forward. We can judge the results, and that's the case, but I don't know that he'll necessarily cop to that today. Do you think he will?
Well, no. I mean, he blitzed for a specific reason. Very young quarterback, not a lot of experience. Exact opposite this week. I think you're back to normal. The blitz rates, 22.8%. They were 30.4% against Sam Howell. So that went up a little bit to 22.8. I think you're back down into that range, the more typical range. Probably a little bit less, if anything.
Right, because Stafford is a grizzled veteran, but we don't even know that Stafford's going to play. And the Rams' backup quarterback is?
I haven't looked yet.
Nor do I know. That's why I'm asking you.
Is it,
should know, but I don't know.
I know they moved on from John Wofford, so that can't be.
The kid they drafted, Stetson Bennett, right?
Oh yeah, he's hurt though, isn't he?
Is he hurt?
Yeah. All right. We got 2 minutes. I'm going to look it up right here.
Who's their veteran backup guy?
I think Brett Rippon. Brett Rippon is the backup.
The immortal Brett Rippon.
Yes, Brett Rippon. So, if Matthew Stafford can't go, I'm going to like the Eagles quite a bit. Nothing against Brett Rippon, but Stetson Bennett is on the non-football injury list.
Really?
So,
okay, so he's not even an option
in play. Yeah.
They got a practice squad quarterback. I should have looked this up.
They do not. So they're one of those teams with only 2 quarterbacks, and I don't like that. You have that emergency quarterback. Yeah. I don't like that. Brett Rippon and especially, Matthew Stafford's banged up.
If he can't go, they're screwed. They got 1 QB.
Yeah, that is bad, Joe. This good. Yeah, that is really bad.
This could play to the Eagles' advantage. All right, Johnny Mac, we'd be out of time. Tell Michael Clay I said hi. You and I back here tomorrow. You in?
Yeah. Big Wednesday, big practice day.
Wednesday, and we'll find out if the Phillies are up for 1-0 at that point or down 1-0. But he, McMullen, me, McDonald, the Mac and Mac guys will be back here on Birds 365 in 2 and 2.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate, inside the locker room, and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.